Rain threaded down the face of Aurora Tower in thin silver lines, blurring the city into ripples of gray and light. From the sidewalk, the building looked like a glass spine pressed up against the sky, every pane reflecting clouds and harbor water, and slick streaks of traffic below. Inside the lobby, the sound of the city softened into a low hum. Water dripped from umbrellas' heels, clicked on polished stone voices, thinned when the revolving doors spun open again, and a woman in a dark coat stepped through. People recognized her before they fully turned their heads. Olivia Grant moved with quick, precise strides across the marble floor, her reflection gliding along the glass wall at her side. Her black heels landed in a steady rhythm, audible even over the rain against the windows. A security guard straightened. Two young engineers by the reception desk cut their conversation short, eyes dropping to their badges. She did not look at them. Her gaze tracked forward, fixed on the bank of elevators, calculating the minutes until her first meeting. A tablet rested in her left-hand screen, lit with unread emails. Her right hand was occupied. A small boy walked beside her, fingers curled tight around hers. Eli's sneakers were damp at the toes, the laces a little crooked. His hair, light brown and too long at the back, clung in dark strands where a few raindrops had escaped the hood of his jacket. He did not look at the people they passed. His eyes moved upward to the ceiling, watching the way the white lights bounced off the glass panels that framed the lobby. When the rain hit the windows in a heavier burst, his gaze sharpened. His free hand lifted, hovering for a moment over the air, as if he could feel the sound more clearly that way. "Morning, Ms. Grant," the receptionist called, a little too bright. Olivia glanced over, gave a curt nod, and kept walking. She did not slow when she felt the receptionist's eyes slide toward Eli, did not acknowledge the quick, sympathetic tightening of her expression. "Good morning," Olivia answered. Her voice landed flat, efficient. "Conference room B is set for 9. "Yes, they are already waiting." "Of course they are." Eli did not speak. He never did. They reached the elevator just as the doors opened. A cluster of employees inside shifted to make space. Olivia guided Eli in front of her, one hand still wrapped around his. She pressed the button for the 32nd floor. Someone in the back murmured a greeting. She replied without turning her head. Eli watched the doors slide shut, the lobby compressing into a slice of color and light before disappearing entirely. The elevator jerked, then began to rise. Muted conversations floated around them. Sales numbers, a bug in the latest build, a joke about the weather that no one found very funny. Eli's fingers relaxed just enough for his hand to slip free. He lifted it slowly and laid his palm on the cool mirrored wall. The elevator vibrated as it climbed. The faint tremor ran into his skin up his fingers along his wrist. His eyes narrowed, curious. Olivia saw the movement in the reflection. Her own face looked back at her, first all sharp cheekbones and tired blue eyes. Then Eli's smaller reflection appeared beside it. He stood very still and, on the glass lips parted just slightly as if listening. Her chest tightened. She reached out and took his hand again, pulling it gently back to his side. "Careful," she said quietly. "You do not want to get your fingers caught when the doors open." He did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the mirror, on the faint double of his face layered over hers. When the elevator chimed and the doors spread apart, Olivia stepped out first, guiding him into the main corridor of Aurora Systems' executive floor. Frosted glass walls lined each side with the company logo floating in gray and silver on every surface. Screens mounted in recessed frames displayed real-time graphs, code snippets, a live feed from some conference in San Francisco. The air smelled like coffee and printer toner and lemon cleaner. It sounded like quiet urgency, muffled footsteps, fingers on keys in offices they passed. "Welcome back, Ms. Grant," her assistant said, hurrying up with a tablet of his own hair slightly askew. Olivia released Eli's hand long enough to take the coffee he offered her. The lid was already marked with a black O. "What does my morning look like?" she asked. 9 o'clock with the Aurora Sense team. Then a call with Singapore. Then you have a 10:30 with Cole about quarterly projections. And the school called yesterday. They wanted to follow up on the program for Eli. I put that on your calendar for the afternoon. No one's confirmed from their side yet. We will reschedule if they do not manage to be on time, she said. Her assistant gave Eli a quick smile. The boy's gaze flicked past him to the windows at the end of the hall, where rain streaked down in soft stripes. Are you staying with Mom today? The assistant asked him, voice pitched high. Eli's face did not change. His eyes moved back to Olivia's hand. Olivia had answered this question so many times that the words came from somewhere separate from her thoughts. He will be in my office, she said. I have the occupational therapist coming at 11. Use the back entrance. I do not want the waiting room full. Her assistant nodded. The subtext hung in the air, familiar and uncomfortable. People stared more when the therapist's waiting room was full. Olivia touched Eli's shoulder. "Come on, you know the way." Her office sat at the far end of the corridor, a corner space with glass on two sides and a view of the harbor. Boats were smudges through the rain, their masts like thin black marks drawn against the sky. Inside, everything was organized: dark wood, desk gray chairs, a sleek shelf of awards. One corner did not match. A small rug with bright stripes lay on the floor near the windows. A low bookcase held picture books and sets of wooden blocks. A worn blue beanbag slumped against the wall, its fabric faded where tiny hands had gripped it again and again. Eli walked there without being told. He shed his jacket in a pile and folded himself down on the rug legs, crossed eyes already on a tower of blocks he had left unfinished the day before. 10 minutes, Olivia said. Then I have to start. You remember the rules? He picked up a block and tapped it twice against another one, a soft, hollow sound. Tap, tap. He did not nod. He did not look up. But his hand paused as if he had heard something she could not. The phone on her desk vibrated across the glass surface. Olivia took a breath in that felt like a decision and looked at the screen. The name there made her jaw tighten. Thomas Grant. She watched the letters for a heartbeat, then two, then crossed the room and picked up the phone. Go on, she told Eli in a softer tone than she had used all morning. Build whatever you want. He tapped the block again. Tap, tap, tap. His eyes were on the floor, on the pieces of wood, not on her. She answered the call. Olivia, Thomas said, skipping any greeting. The sound of his voice dragged memories with it. Years of arguments, of calm explanations that felt like knives. Did you get the brochure I sent? I deleted it. It was from the best center on the West Coast. They have a full residential program. Speech therapy, behavioral support, the works. You know he would get more attention there than sitting on your office floor while you run a tech empire. She pinched the bridge of her nose, staring out at the rain. It ran down the glass in threads that merged and separated again like something trying to make itself heard. He is 8, not a package, she said, and I am not dropping my son off in another state to visit once a month. You cannot keep doing this alone. I am not asking for your help, Olivia answered. Her voice stayed level, but her fingers dug faint crescents into the edge of the desk. And I am not sending him away because you are uncomfortable that he does not talk on command. On the rug, Eli stacked 2 blocks with careful precision. His hand shook a little as he pressed them together. The blocks clicked softly. He paused, then pressed his palm against the tower, feeling the slight wobble as it settled. You are not being rational, Thomas said. He has not spoken a word in 8 years, not a sound. At some point you have to admit this is permanent. Olivia's eyes flicked to her son. He had stopped moving. The block sat in a small, uneven column. His head was tilted as if he was listening, but not to the phone, not to the arguments that had become their own static in the background of his life. I have admitted nothing, she said, except that I will not have this conversation again. Olivia. She ended the call. The silence that followed did not feel empty. The air in the office held the residue of what had been said, of what had been thrown between them for years. Her shoulders ached with the effort of keeping her spine straight. She let her hand fall from the phone and turned away from the window. The glass behind her reflected a blurred version of her back and the city beyond. Her eyes did not meet that reflection. They went straight to Eli. He was lying on his stomach now, chin propped on his hands, watching the rain run down the window. The block stood beside him like a tiny crooked tower that might fall with the right vibration. Hey, she said softly, you all right? He did not nod. His fingers moved over the rug, tracing the weave, pressing into the fabric, as if testing how solid it was. She crossed the room and lowered herself to sit beside him, the hem of her skirt brushing the carpet. Her hand hovered over his back for a moment, then settled lightly between his shoulder blades. His t-shirt was warm under her palm. She felt the steady rise and fall of his breath. Out beyond the glass, the rain kept coming, tapping against the window in patterns he watched, as if each one meant something. You are staying with me, she said quietly, not sure if she was talking to him or to herself. Here, with me. Her phone buzzed on the desk again, then fell still when she did not move. Eli reached out and placed one block on top of another with slow care. He did not look at her, but he curled his free hand around the edge of her knee, a small anchor she could feel even through the fabric. The building hummed around them. Air vents, distant elevators, the soft rumble of servers behind walls. Somewhere far below, water slapped against concrete on the harbor. The sounds threaded together into a low background noise that had become the soundtrack of Olivia's days. She listened to it without quite noticing the way she always did. Eli listened too, in a way she did not yet understand. In the reflection on the glass, they were just two shapes pressed close together at the edge of a high, bright room. A woman in a sharp suit, a boy in a t-shirt that had seen too many washes, both of them still for the moment, while the rain wrote its own rhythm on the world outside. By late afternoon, the rain had softened to a steady mist. It blurred the glass walls of the lower floors and turned the plaza outside Aurora Tower into a sheet of pale reflection. On the service level, the lights were harsher. White strips buzzed overhead, making the hallway look almost colorless. The smell of cleaner and hot rubber cartwheels hung in the air. Caleb Mason pushed his cart along the corridor, the front wheels squeaking every third turn. He could have fixed it easily. He had not yet decided if he wanted to. The floor beneath him was a grid of pale tiles. He moved in a straight line, pausing now and then to adjust a crooked trash can or tuck a stray cable back into place. The building hummed around him. Air conditioning pipes, faraway printers, the muffled roar of the lobby several stories above. He heard it all without looking up. At a junction in the hall, he stopped and leaned his shoulder against the wall for a second. He shut his eyes. The sounds separated in his head the way they always did. High, low, steady, irregular. A faint rattling somewheres to his right, like a vent panel coming loose. A low vibration in the floor that did not match the usual rhythm of the old elevator on the west side. Most people would have called it nothing, background noise. To Caleb, it was a kind of map. He turned right. 4 doors down, he bent and tightened a screw on a vent grill with the small tool he kept in his pocket. The rattling settled. The air shifted to a calmer tone. "That thing ever stopped singing to you, Mason?" a voice called from behind him. He looked over his shoulder. Jorge from facilities stood at the corner, a bundle of replacement filters under one arm. "Not really," Caleb said. Jorge chuckled and shook his head. "You hear ghosts in the ductwork. I hear a paycheck and a sore back." Caleb let the corner of his mouth lift. "Someone has to listen when it starts complaining." "You are weird, man." Jorge walked off. The filters squeaked against his shirt with each step. Caleb straightened, wiped his hand on his dark blue pant leg, and pushed his cart on. His badge read C, Mason Aurora Services. The plastic had a scratch through the last N. Nobody had bothered to replace it. He had not asked. On his break, he sat in the small staff kitchen with its metal tables and humming refrigerator. A radio played softly near the sink out of station, just enough that the music blurred at the edges. He opened a lunchbox that had seen better years and took out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He ate without much thought, eyes on the printout folded in his pocket instead of the food. Grease had smudged one corner of the page. Equations and notes in his own handwriting curved along the margin. Frequency ranges, bone conduction thresholds, old habits, old work. He folded the paper again before he finished reading it and slid it back into his pocket. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then steadied. The fridge rattled softly as the compressor kicked in. "You are a janitor now," he reminded himself. "You clean. You keep the building from falling apart in the small ways that no one notices. That is enough." His phone buzzed in his other pocket. He took it out, and his face changed before he even tapped the screen. A photo filled the display. Rosy, smiling, wide cheeks smudged with something that looked like powdered sugar. She sat at their tiny kitchen table at home, a lopsided cupcake in front of her frosting sliding down one side. The message underneath read, "They let me decorate my own. I only ate some of the sprinkles, promise." He smiled properly, then slow and honest. His thumb hovered over the keyboard for a moment as he thought of what to write back. "Looks good," he typed. "Save one for me if the sprinkles survive." Her reply came almost at once. "You have 1 hour, then they are history." He shook his head, half a laugh catching in his throat. The sound surprised him. It still did sometimes. The rain outside thickened again. He could tell by the way the gray light at the edge of his vision dimmed. Later, near the end of his shift, he was sent upstairs to polish the marble flooring near the elevators in the main lobby. Those were the jobs he did without making eye contact. People in suits rarely looked at him long enough for it to matter. The lobby had changed since the morning. The rush had thinned. The front desk staff moved more slowly. A delivery guy signed a clipboard by the revolving doors, his jacket dripping a small puddle onto the mat. Caleb plugged in the floor polisher. The motor rumbled to life, sending a throbbing through the handle into his hands. He guided it in smooth overlapping passes, the machine leaving a dull floor shining behind it. His world narrowed to the arc in front of him. The machine, the hum, the slick feel of polished stone. Then out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a small figure near the far wall. A little girl in a red raincoat sat on one of the lobby benches, legs swinging above the floor. She had a backpack almost as big as her torso, resting beside her, and her sneakers were scuffed at the toes. Blonde hair escaped in frizzy loops from a ponytail that had lost its battle with the damp air. She tugged at the zipper of her backpack, then glanced toward the security desk. "Excuse me," she said. The guard looked up. "My dad works here. He said I could wait inside. He is still cleaning the upstairs." "I am not in the way, am I?" The guard smiled. "You are fine, kiddo. You want some water?" "I am good, thank you." She hopped off the bench, walked closer to the glass, and pressed her palms to it. The rain streaked down just beyond her fingers. Caleb knew that raincoat. He knew that backpack. He turned off the polisher and leaned on the handle for a moment. "Rosie," he called softly. She spotted him and broke into a grin. "Dad." Her footsteps slapped on the marble as she ran over. She stopped short of him and eyed the machine. "That one looks like it could eat my shoes." "It could," he said, "if your shoes get too close." "What are you doing down here already?" "School let out early. Aunt May dropped me. I asked the guard, and he said I can wait as long as I do not slide down the railings." Her eyes were already drifting past him, taking in the lobby, the tall ceiling, the soft reflections on the floor. She always liked big spaces. The sound carried differently. "Sit over there," he said. "I will not be long. Stay clear of the cord." "Yes, sir." She gave a mock salute and skipped back toward the benches. On her way, she nearly collided with a small, slight boy stepping out of the elevator beside a woman in a dark blazer. Caleb saw him in profile first. Light brown hair, paler than Rosie's. Thin arms and a gray sweatshirt. The slight inward curl of his shoulders like he was trying to take up less space. Olivia Grant walked beside him, her phone to her ear, voice low. She nodded at the receptionist without breaking her sentence. The boy stopped just short of bumping Rosie. His gaze landed on her shoes. They were bright red, soaked near the soles, with little stars on the sides that had started to peel. "I like your shoes," she said automatically. He lifted his head a little. His eyes were a gray so light they almost looked silver in the lobby's soft light. He did not answer. Rosie tilted her head. "I am Rosie," she said. "My dad cleans your floors." She pointed across the lobby at Caleb without looking away from the boy. He followed her finger with his eyes. He saw Caleb in the machine, the coil of cord on the ground. Then his gaze shifted back to the girl. Up close, Caleb could see the small lines at the corners of the boy's eyes. Not age, something else, tight from effort. Olivia's voice cut in sharper than before. She had ended her call and turned fully toward them now. Her attention swept over. Rosie took in the red coat, the backpack, the wet hair. Then it moved to Caleb. For a moment their eyes met. He gave a small nod meant to be polite, nothing more, and put his attention back on his machine. Olivia hesitated, then looked at her son. "Come on, we are going home," she said softer. Eli did not move away from Rosie right away. He studied her face as if filing it somewhere in his mind. Then he lifted his hand and tapped his fingers twice on the edge of the bench. A clear, small sound. Rosie's brows raised. She mirrored him tapping twice on the metal armrest beside her, matching his rhythm. The corners of her mouth twitched up. Caleb felt something in his chest go tight. The polisher handle grew heavier in his palms. The small exchange took no more than a second, but it landed with the weight of something larger. Olivia repeated with a hint of warning. He stepped back. The contact broke. His hand fell to his side again, the moment disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. Rosie watched him walk away with his mother. Her eyes followed them to the glass doors, to the waiting car outside, with wipers cutting back and forth through the drizzle. She came back to her father's side a minute later. "Who was that?" she asked. "The CEO," he said, "and her son." "She looked like she had not slept in 3 years, Rosie said, lowering her voice as if they shared a secret. "He looked like he was listening to something nobody else hears." Caleb glanced toward the doors. Olivia and Eli were already out of sight. He turned the polisher on again. The motor filled the space between his thoughts with its rough, constant sound. "Maybe he is," he said. Rosie dropped down to sit on the clean section of floor he had just finished, legs crossed, backpack in her lap. She hummed under her breath, a tuneless line that matched the rhythm of the machine without quite repeating it. The lobby settled into its evening quiet, lights dimmed by a fraction. The rain outside shivered across the glass. Caleb guided the polisher in careful arcs, watching its reflection move across the floor. In that reflection, he could see himself, and a little behind him, the small shape of his daughter sitting very still, listening to a world that had always been loud to him, and somehow not loud enough in all the right places. The 17th floor of Aurora Tower smelled different that day. Someone had dragged rolls of plastic sheeting across the carpet. Fresh paint lingered in the air from a wall that used to be pale gray and was now a sharp white. A stack of cardboard boxes leaned against one side of the corridor, each stamped with the Aurora logo and the words Display Unit printed in neat black letters. The renovation crew from facilities had been at it since morning. Ceiling tiles were lifted cables, threaded the muted thud of tools traveling down the hall. At the far end of the corridor, a group of workers crowded around a massive flat panel secured to a rolling cart. The screen was taller than any of them, wrapped half in bubble wrap and half in clear plastic that clung to its surface. "Careful on the corner," one of them said. "If we scratch this thing, Cole will have my head." "I would worry more about the glass," another replied, nodding toward the floor-to-ceiling panels along the outer wall. "You know what this much weight does if somebody misses a step." They laughed, but there was a tightness under it. The hallway was narrower than usual. Plastic covered part of one wall. Cables snaked under clear tape. The cart took up most of the space. Olivia walked toward it, tablet in hand, her other hand wrapped around Eli's. She had meant to leave him in her office. The call with Singapore had run long. The occupational therapist had rescheduled. Her assistant had been pulled into a surprise audit. A string of small shifts that added up to one choice: bring him with her or leave him alone. So, he walked at her side, eyes tracing the exposed wiring in the ceiling. A small sticker in the shape of a rocket ship clung to the side of his sneaker, half peeled away. "Construction zone today," her assistant had warned at the elevator. "They are moving that giant display from the old conference room." "We will be quick," Olivia said. Olivia said. She measured space automatically as she approached. The distance from the screen to the opposite wall, the angle of the cart, the gap where she and Eli would have to pass. "Hold on," a worker called to her as she came within a few steps. "Give us 1 minute to straighten this turn." She nodded and drew Eli to the side closer to the glass. Rain had returned heavier than the mist of the morning, streaming down the outside of the building in thick lines. The city beyond was only shapes now soft and shifting. Eli pressed his free palm against the window. The chill of the glass sank into his skin. Somewhere inside the wall, deep in the structure of the building, the faint vibration of the storm reached him. He watched his own hand-flattened fingers splayed almost the same size as the handprint he had left there another day when the light had been different. "Okay, easy," the crew chief said. 4 men gripped the edges of the cart, 1 at the front, 1 at the back, 2 on either side. The chief signaled with his chin. They pushed. The cart rolled forward, wheels squeaking under the weight. One of the men at the side adjusted his grip, his fingers slipping slightly where a strip of plastic had come loose. "Wait," he said. The cart met a tiny ridge in the floor, where plastic sheeting ended and carpet began. One wheel bumped. The weight shifted. The next sound hit hard enough that the air seemed to jump. The massive panel lurched sideways and came off the cart. For a split second it hung there, leaning, its reflection shattering in the glass windows beside it. Then gravity took it. The screen slammed into the floor with a crack that might have belonged to breaking stone. The whole corridor shook. The glass walls shivered in their frames, a low resonant groan traveling along the steel supports. Someone shouted. Bubble wrap split. A corner of the panel dug a groove into the carpet. Olivia flinched. Her hand tightened around Eli's. The sound crawled through her teeth, made her jaw ache. Several offices down the hall doors opened. Faces appeared, eyes wide, papers still in hand. A mug rolled off a nearby desk and broke on the carpet with a much smaller, almost apologetic clink. On the 15th floor, 2 levels below, Caleb heard the impact as a dull, distant thud. The floor under his boots trembled. A cart of cleaning supplies rattled beside him. He straightened slowly in the empty copy room. He had been sweeping his body still for a moment as he listened. The echo of the crash spread out, thinning. The building absorbed it, let it fade. Something else did not fade. A high, piercing tone threaded through the air, too sharp to be part of the normal noise. It sliced through the hum of ventilation and the low, steady vibration of the elevator shafts. It sat at the very edge of hearing and pulled every nerve in his neck tight. He knew that sound. Not exactly. Not this particular voice, the shape of it, the interference pattern of an overloaded driver, the flicker of a faulty modulator spiking at the wrong frequency. He had heard it a lifetime ago in a lab full of prototypes and hopeful people. The broom handle creaked in his hand. He let it go and stepped into the hallway. The tone wavered, then steadied again. It came from above, not below. He felt it in the bones around his ears more than in the air. Caleb moved toward the service stairs without thinking. He opened the door, took the steps 2 at a time. The stairwell smelled like paint and metal, and something slightly damp. 16, 17. On the landing he paused again, hand on the cool railing, head tilted. The interference screamed on. Under it he could hear other noises now, raised voices, the scattered rhythm of running feet. He pushed the door open. The corridor outside was a tangle of people and plastic in broken order. The giant display lay face down on the carpet plastic wrap, stretched across its back like a torn skin. Tools lay where they had fallen. A roll of tape had unraveled itself halfway down the hall. Near the window, a small knot of bodies closed in tight around something on the floor. Give him some space. Call downstairs. Get medical up here. How did that thing come off the cart? Back up, please. Everyone back up. The high note that had pulled Caleb upstairs drilled through his skull now. It came in uneven bursts. Spike, pause, spike. He knew where to look even before he stepped closer. Through the shifting line of shoulders and arms, he caught a glimpse of a small form on the carpet. A gray sweatshirt, bare ankles above sneakers, fingers clamped over ears. Eli. His mouth was open, teeth clenched, chest heaving. No sound came out. His face was contorted as if something inside his head was being ripped loose. Olivia was on her knees beside him. Her hair had come loose from the twist at the back of her head. Her hand gripped his arm, knuckles white. Eli, look at me, she said. You are all right. You are all right. Just look at me, baby. He did not. His eyes were squeezed shut. The high tone spiked again. Caleb felt his stomach lurch in sympathy. He followed it with his attention, the way he had followed loose wires and failing motors for years. It was not coming from the broken display, not from the tools or the ceiling or any of the equipment pushed up against the walls. It came from the space right around Eli's head, more precisely from his right ear. Caleb stepped closer. Someone tried to block him with an arm. Sir, you cannot be here, a man in a bright yellow safety vest said. I work here, Caleb answered. We have it handled all right. Just go back. Handled. The word did not match what Caleb saw. Eli's hands dug into the sides of his head as if he could claw the pain out. His shoulders shook. Every line in his small body spoke of something more than being startled by a loud noise. Caleb looked at Olivia. For the first time since he had seen her in the lobby, weeks ago, she met his eyes fully. There was no cool distance in her expression now, only fear and something close to fury at her own helplessness. Ms. Grant, he said. His voice did not come out as steady as he wanted. He swallowed him and tried again. Ms. Grant. She blinked as if dragging herself up from somewhere deep. What, she snapped. He crouched, keeping a careful distance, not touching either of them. There is a device, he said, keeping his tone low so it did not bounce around the corridor. In his ear, right side, it is malfunctioning. Olivia frowned. A what? A vibration unit. Bone conduction, old model. He had to break it up into pieces. Too much information would bounce off her right now. I hear its interference. That is what is hurting him. She stared at him. You are a janitor, she said. It came out flat, almost numb. Behind them, someone muttered into a phone calling for the medical team. Another person was talking over them, offering an explanation about the equipment failure. The tone sharpened. Eli arched his back. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye, ran into his hair. Caleb's hands closed into fists on his knees. I used to design those devices, he said. I know the sound they make when they fail. Nothing else in this hallway is putting out that frequency. I have had specialists with him for years, Olivia said. Her voice cracked at the last word. You think they would have missed something like that? Yes, he said. It landed between them like another dropped object. He kept his gaze on hers. He did not look at the people around them. I can see it if you let me look, he said. I will not touch him without your permission, but if I am right, this will not stop until the device does. Her eyes flicked to her son. His fingers had slipped a fraction away from his ear. Red skin showed where he had pressed too hard. Between his hand and his hairline, there was a hint of something else, a pale rim almost the same color as his skin. Her breath caught. She shifted, leaning closer, trying to see into his ear. Eli pulled his hand back up, blocking her view, a small animal trying to protect the source of its pain. Olivia exhaled through clenched teeth. All right, she said. She looked at Caleb again. The fear was still there. So was the fury. Do not hurt him, she added. I will not, he said. She moved her hand from Eli's arm to his shoulders, steadying him as best she could. Eli, she whispered, someone is going to help you now. Keep your eyes on me, okay? The boy's eyelids fluttered, then lifted halfway. His gaze was glassy, unfocused, but it dragged itself to her face. Caleb took a small flashlight from his pocket, the same one he used to check under vending machines and inside air vents. He clicked it on the beam, narrow and bright. He reached out slowly, so slowly that the whole world seemed to have slowed with him. His fingers smelled faintly of cleaner and metal. His hand hovered near the side of Eli's head, waiting. Can I touch your ear, kiddo? He asked. The tone screamed again. Eli flinched, his breath catching. His hand trembled as he let it fall a fraction. opening the space around his ear. It was not an answer spoken in any language most people would have heard. Caleb took it as one all the same. Caleb brought the light closer. The small circle of brightness slid over Eli's hair, then his ear. The outer curve looked normal, a little flushed, a little red where his fingers had pressed, but normal. Inside, where shadow should have filled the narrow space, something else caught the light. A thin, pale ring sat just past the entrance of the canal. The surface was slick, almost translucent, with a tiny metallic gleam set into one edge. It was nearly the same color as skin. From any distance at all, it would have disappeared. The frequency in Caleb's head climbed for a moment, as if reacting to being seen. "There you are," he said under his breath. He shifted the light to his left hand and steadied it. With his right, he reached in, not with panic, not with haste. His fingertips brushed Eli's skin, then found the edge of the ring. It was warm, too warm for plastic alone. Eli jerked once, shoulders lifting, but Olivia's hands held him, her fingers spread along his back like a brace. "Breathe with me," she murmured, voice breaking only slightly. "In, out, in." Caleb pinched the ring gently between his thumb and forefinger. Years of muscle memory cut in. He knew the angle these devices tended to sit. He knew the way they slid if they had been in place too long. "Almost there," he said. The interference shrieked a last protesting spike, and then the ring gave. It loosened with a small slick movement and came free into his hand. The sound in his head cut off so suddenly that for a moment the silence roared. The hum of the building returned in pieces. Air vents, voices, the distant roll of a cart. Eli's body sagged. The rigid line of his spine softened. His hand slipped away from his ears and fell onto the carpet. His mouth closed. His eyes opened slowly, pupils widening, then contracting again as the corridor came into focus. He drew in a long, shuddering breath that sounded like something new. Olivia made a sound too. It was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. It was both compressed into one choked exhale. She pulled him against her, one arm around his shoulders, the other hand cupping the back of his head. "Okay," she whispered into his hair. "Okay, you are all right. You are all right." He blinked, lashes still wet. His gaze shifted unfixed, catching on the faces around him. The outlines of hard hats, the spill of plastic, the bright yellow vest of the safety officer. He frowned slightly, as if the world had moved a few inches to one side without telling him. Caleb sat back on his heels. The device lay in his palm, small and unremarkable. A silicone ring with a tiny metal disc embedded on one side. No markings, no manufacturer's logo. It had the look of something made cheaply and sold quickly. It glistened with a thin sheen of moisture. A faint crack ran across the metal. The edges of the silicone were discolored, as if it had been reacting to the environment inside the ear for a long time. "What is that?" one of the workers asked, leaning in. The safety officer shot him a look. "Give them space." Footsteps pounded in the corridor. The medical team from downstairs arrived with a small cart. A woman in dark scrubs knelt on the other side of Eli. "What happened?" she asked. "A display fell," the safety officer said. "Scared him half to death." "That is not what this is," Caleb said. The medic glanced at him, then at Olivia. She seemed to take her cue from the person whose name was on the top floor. Olivia did not answer at once. She was looking at the little ring in Caleb's hand. "It was in his ear," she said finally. The words sounded as if she had to drag them through something thick. "It should not have been there." The medic's eyes sharpened. "In his ear?" "Yes," Caleb said. "Vibration device, bone conduction, old tech. It was putting out interference." The medic took a small penlight from her pocket. "May I look?" she asked Olivia. Olivia nodded and shifted aside enough for the medic to shine the light into Eli's ear. He sat very still now, leaning against his mother's cheeks, still damp, but muscles no longer clenched. The medic frowned at what she saw, then looked at the device in Caleb's palm again. "That was lodged in there?" "It was," he said. "Deep enough to miss if you were not looking for it." "How long?" she asked. "I would guess years," he said. "Judging from the degradation on the surface and the crack in the driver, but that is speculation until someone puts it under a scope." The medic gave him a strange look, somewhere between suspicion and recognition. "You know a lot about something you just pulled out of a kid's ear." "I used to work with them," he said. "Different models." Her gaze went back to Eli, who had turned his head toward a sound further down the hall. A phone ringing in an open office. The distant whine of a drill someone had forgotten to turn off. His eyes followed the noises in a way they had not before. "Can you hear that?" Olivia asked softly. He did not answer with words, but his head tilted and his brows pulled together slightly, as if he was sorting signals. The medic put away her light. "Let us get him downstairs," she said. Vitals reflexes a quick check to make sure there is no other foreign object. Then he should see his own doctor as soon as possible. You said he has a specialist. Yes, Olivia said. Her throat worked. He has several. Caleb curled his fingers in around the device, then thought better of it and reached for a small evidence bag hanging from the safety officer's belt. May I, he asked. The officer blinked. It is just for broken glass and stuff, he said. That will do, Caleb replied. He slipped the device into the plastic, sealed the top, and wiped his hand on his pant leg. The bag made the object seem even smaller, a meaningless piece of trash. It swung a little from his fingers. Olivia watched that small swing as if it were a pendulum counting out years. Keep that, she said quietly. Do not lose it. I had not planned to, he said. The medic and another team member helped Eli to his feet. He swayed once, then steadied. Olivia held his shoulders, guiding him, matching her steps to his. As they passed Caleb, Eli's eyes flicked up. For a brief second they met his. No gratitude, no understanding. Just a raw, tired curiosity. The look of someone who had been inside a storm and was now standing in air that felt wrong in its calm. Thank you, Olivia said. She did not look at Caleb when she said it. Her gaze stayed ahead on the elevator that would take them down. The crowd thinned after they left. The workers drifted back to the display, voices low now. Someone cursed softly when they saw the crack running along the screen's edge. The safety officer started filling out a report on a clipboard. Caleb remained where he was, kneeling for a long moment on the carpet, the weight of the tiny plastic bag resting in his hand. He had pulled damaged equipment from cavities before. The undersides of machines, the insides of walls, places where things had been forced in and then forgotten. Never from a child. He stood up slowly. His knees creaked a little. He slipped the bag into his pocket, feeling the hard outline against his leg. On his way back to the service stairs, he passed the window where Eli had stood. The rain outside looked the same. Vertical streaks of silver on glass, the faint quiver of wind. Inside, something had shifted. That night, the building emptied and refilled in waves as people went home, as cleaning crews moved through, as security rotated. By the time the sky over the harbor turned from steel to black, the 17th floor was quiet again. The damaged display had been covered with a tarp. Yellow tape crossed the area in an X. In her apartment above the city, Olivia sat at her kitchen table with a glass of water she had not touched. Eli was asleep in the next room. She had checked 3 times already, pushing his door open just enough to see him breathing steady in the glow of the nightlight. He lay on his side, hands, relaxed hair fanned out on the pillow, in a way that made him look younger than 8. On the table under the overhead light, the small plastic bag lay next to her phone. The device looked even less important now, a piece of something someone might step on in a hardware store. She picked up the bag. The plastic crackled between her fingers. The ring inside slid from one corner to another and back like a lazy insect. She held it closer to her face. There were no identifying marks, no serial number, no logo, just the faint hairline break in the metal and the uneven tone of the silicone where it had aged. Her thumb rubbed over the outside of the bag. "Where did you come from?" she said quietly. The question sat in the kitchen with her. She could picture the years and visits and forms: pediatrician, audiologist, neurologist. Therapists lined up in a calendar she had color-coded until it looked like stained glass. Exam rooms with cartoon posters on the wall, charts, test results. Profound hearing loss. No functional vocalization. They had inserted probes, placed electrodes, printed graphs. No one had seen this, or if they saw, they had not recognized it for what it was. Her jaw clenched. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a number she nearly never used. A private lab that handled certain Aurora projects when discretion mattered more than price. The line clicked. "This is Grant," she said. "I need an analysis." She did not use words like emergency. She did not have to. Her voice carried something that made the person on the other end stop asking questions and start listening. When she ended the call, the rain had started outside, tapping against her windows with the same soft insistence as in the office, only wilder. She sat there a little longer, elbows on the table, hands wrapped around the empty glass. A faint sound drifted from down the hall, not a cry, not a shout, the rustle of sheets, the careful thump of a small hand against a headboard, a pattern she recognized. Eli checking the world with his fingertips. She stood and went to his door. He had rolled onto his back, one hand lifted, tapping the wall beside him. Tap, tap. Then a pause. Then tap, tap, tap. She leaned her forehead against the frame and watched. His eyes were closed. The pattern seemed to soothe him. After a few minutes, his hand stilled. His chest rose and fell. Olivia stepped back into the hallway. The apartment was quiet. The city was not. Sirens somewhere far off. A horn. the distant rumble of a train. The rain softened them, pressed them into the glass until they were all part of the same low murmur. She turned off the kitchen light and left the plastic bag on the table, the pale ring inside catching the last glint from the window before the room went dark. The lab report arrived the next morning, before the sun had fully burned through the low cloud over the harbor. Olivia was in her office when her private line rang, not the main number routed through her assistant, the shorter one, the one only a handful of people had. "Grant," she said. "Ms. Grant, it is Mallory at Harbor Diagnostics," a woman's voice replied. "You asked us to prioritize an analysis. We have preliminary findings." Olivia set down her coffee. Her hand left a faint ring of warmth on the glass of her desk. "I am listening." "We received a small bone conduction ring device," Mallory said. "Unmarked manufacturing. Composition suggests a low-cost silicone and an unshielded driver. The circuitry is rudimentary. It resembles several discontinued designs from unnamed overseas factories. I would classify it as unregulated hardware." "How long could something like that function inside an ear without being noticed?" Olivia asked. In a child, Mallory paused. If inserted incorrectly and left in place, the silicone could seat itself deeper over time. Unless someone looked very closely and specifically for it, it might be mistaken for part of the canal in a superficial exam. "And the frequencies," Olivia said. "You looked at what it was putting out." "Yes. The driver is damaged, the output is unstable. There are spikes in the 8 to 10 kilohertz range with irregular harmonics. That would create a persistent noise floor. Imagine static in your head that never fully stops. For a developing brain, it is not something I would want to see." Olivia pressed her thumb into the edge of the desk, grounding herself to the solid surface. "Could it have interfered with any remaining hearing capacity?" she asked. "Very likely," Mallory said. "The interference is strong enough that it would mask weaker signals. It would certainly not help. I cannot speak to specific medical outcomes without seeing the patient, but if there was any residual hearing, this would have competed with it constantly." "Do you have any idea where this could have come from?" Olivia asked. "We tracked the component pattern as far as we could," Mallory replied. "One of my engineers recognized the driver configuration as something often found in devices sold on gray markets, unregulated online vendors, sometimes marketed as miracle aids for children." Olivia closed her eyes for a second. "Thank you," she said. "Send the full report encrypted." "Of course." When she hung up, the office was very quiet. Outside the window, the bay lay flat and dull. The ferries crossed in narrow white arcs. The rain had stopped, but the clouds had not yet moved on. Everything looked paused. She opened a folder on her screen, pulled up a set of old emails, and scrolled until she found one with a polite subject line from years ago. "Recommendation for additional support," it read. Attached was a brochure she had barely skimmed at the time. A private caregiver service vetted by someone on her board, full of smiling stock photos and soft colors. The nanny she had hired through that service had stayed with them for a year, then left for family reasons. It had seemed uneventful. Olivia magnified one photo in the brochure, a generic image of a woman crouching beside a child holding up a small device to the child's ear. The child smiled, mouth open in a laugh. The device in the photo did not look identical to the one in the plastic bag, but it belonged to the same family. She closed the folder. The light outside shifted slightly as the clouds thinned. A stripe of brightness slid over the floor. On the 17th floor, the tarp still covered the broken display. Yellow tape still crossed the corridor. People stepped around it now without stopping. On the service level, Caleb stacked bottles of cleaner on a narrow shelf in a supply room that always smelled like citrus and dust. The shelves were metal old enough that a few flecks of rust showed at the joints. A mop bucket sat in the corner, water inside rippling gently every time someone walked by out in the hall. The plastic bag with the device rested in his shirt pocket. He could feel the stiff edge when he bent forward. Footsteps approached, different from the measured pace of his co-workers. Lighter, shorter, then heavier steps joined them. He turned as Rosie poked her head around the doorframe. "There you are," she said. She stepped fully into the room. Her backpack was slung off one shoulder this time. Her hair was still messy. She had added a purple clip in a brave attempt at control. Behind her, Olivia stopped at the threshold. The supply room was not a space that usually saw the CEO. The fluorescent light washed her face, flattening the shadows, making the faint circles under her eyes more obvious. "Ms. Grant," Caleb said. He straightened reflexively, a cloth still in his hand. "Rosie, wait outside for a minute, please," he added gently. Rosie looked between the two adults, then nodded. She retreated to the hall, swinging her backpack around to the front as she went. The door closed most of the way behind her, leaving a narrow crack. Olivia looked at the shelves for a moment, as if orienting herself to a place that did not belong on her usual map. Then her gaze went to Caleb. "Yesterday," she said, "with my son, I owe you more than a thank you in a hallway." "You do not owe me anything," he said. Her eyes flicked to his pocket, where the outline of the small bag showed faintly beneath the fabric. "The lab confirmed what you said," she went on. "Unregulated device, faulty driver. It has been in his ear for years." She did not sit. There was nowhere to sit except an upturned crate, and the crate was occupied by cartons of paper towels. "They think it was bought through some gray market vendor," she said. "A nanny I hired. She meant well. She told me she was researching alternatives. I thought it was initiative. I did not ask enough questions." Her hand tightened on the strap of the bag at her side. "For 8 years I believed he was born trapped in silence," she said. "I believed that was how the world had written him. And the whole time there was a piece of cheap hardware lodged in his ear, screaming over whatever was left of his own signal." She did not cry. Her voice stayed level. That made it worse. Caleb leaned his back against the shelf, the metal cool through his shirt. "I am sorry," he said, "for what she asked. You did not put it there." "No," he said, "but I know what these devices were supposed to do. I know how wrong they can go." She frowned. "You said you used to design them," she said, "before you started cleaning floors here." He nodded once. "I was an engineer," he said, "acoustic systems. My wife and I ran a lab in a smaller company. We built prototypes for bone conduction aids, for children who could not use traditional hearing devices. She was better than I was at it, at the theory. I was good with failure." "Failure," Olivia repeated. "Devices that did not work the way they should," he said. "Bad feedback, wrong output. People would throw them away. I took them apart until I understood why they failed. Then we tried again." Her gaze softened a fraction at the mention of his wife. It was a small shift, but he noticed. "What happened to that life?" she asked. He pictured headlights on wet asphalt, the smell of burnt rubber, hospital disinfectant. A driver looked at the wrong thing. For half a second he said, "My wife did not come home. I could not stand the sound of my own work after that." He shrugged one shoulder. "So, I came here," he said. "A building full of machines that are not my responsibility. Floors to clean. A job where my hands stay busy and my head stays quiet." "It does not sound very quiet," she said. He tilted his head, listening for a second. The whir of the vent, the ticking of the old clock above the door, a faint drip from a poorly sealed pipe in the corner, the muffled voices from the hall where Rosie hummed something tuneless. "No," he admitted, "not really." A small silence settled between them. "I sent the device to a private lab," she said. "They confirmed it has been degrading for years. They also said something else." He waited. "They said its interference could have masked any residual hearing Eli had," she said. "They do not know how much he started with, but whatever was there has been fighting against that noise. That is why he shut down so completely around sound. It was all the wrong kind." She looked up at him fully. "You recognized it in seconds," she said. 8 years of specialists, and you heard it in a hallway. Wrong frequencies stand out," he said. "If you spend long enough listening for them, you do not forget." She watched him for a moment. "You are wasted on a mop," she said finally. He shifted, unsure whether to take that as insult or compliment. Something about her tone suggested it was neither. "I am paid on time," he replied. "I get to be home when my daughter gets out of school most days. It is not nothing." She smiled once, a short, humorless curve of her mouth. "What if you could keep that and also do what you actually know how to do?" she asked. He frowned. "I do not follow." "I am restructuring part of our R&D allocation," she said. "Yesterday clarified some things I have been ignoring. Aurora has the resources to create devices that do not ruin children's hearing while promising to save it. We can build proper testing, proper safeguards." His chest tightened. The supply room seemed smaller. "You want Aurora to start making hearing aids," he said. "I want Aurora to build tools that do not turn children into collateral damage," she said. "Call them what you like." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "This is an offer," she said. "Senior acoustic consultant. We provide lab space. Staff. You provide expertise." He did not take the envelope right away. "Ms. Grant," he said, "I have not touched a lab bench in 10 years. You pulled a device out of my son's ear without flinching yesterday," she said. "That is more useful than a line on a resume." He almost smiled at that. "I clean floors," he said. "I am good at cleaning up other people's messes. That is what this would be too." "Perhaps," she said, "but this time you would be cleaning at the source." She set the envelope on the shelf beside a stack of folded cloths. "My board will not like it," she added. They do not see this as our business. They see it as a distraction. They will call it an indulgence. Then why offer it? He asked. She hesitated. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its steel. Because when the panel fell yesterday and I watched my son reach for his ears like the world was tearing itself apart in his head, none of those people in suits could do anything she said. You could. Her eyes glistened once, and she blinked the moisture away. I cannot erase the years he lost, she said, but I can decide what we do with the ones left. From the hallway, Rosie knocked on the door with the back of her hand. Dad, she called, they have muffins out there, the good kind with big crumbs. The receptionist said I could have one if I bring you two. Caleb let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. I will be right there, he called back. He picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than it should. The paper smelled faintly of printer ink and the perfume that clung to Olivia's clothes. He did not open it. Think about it, she said. That is all I am asking. He nodded. She stepped back, her hand on the door. For a second she looked like she might say something more. Instead she inclined her head and left. The hallway sounds grew clearer again when the door opened. Rosie's voice rose over them. Did she yell at you? She asked in a stage whisper. She looked serious. She offered me a job, he said. You already have a job, Rosie replied. 2 jobs if you count fixing all the things you are not paid to fix. This would be a different job, he said. She leaned against his side as they walked toward the elevator, muffin crumbs already on her fingers. Does it help kids like Eli? She asked. He looked at the envelope in his hand. It might, he said. Then you should probably do it, she said. Mom would say so. The mention of his wife landed in his chest with a familiar ache and a smaller, newer warmth. Rosie wiped her sticky hand on his sleeve without thinking. He did not mind. They stepped into the elevator. He pressed the button for the lobby. The car shuddered slightly, then began to move. The faint hum of its motor threaded up through his bones. He listened as the floor numbers blinked by the sounds of the building layering over each other. Frequencies he knew, frequencies he had avoided. The envelope rustled in his grip. The new room did not look like anything else on the 21st floor. Most of Aurora's spaces were sharp angles and cool colors, glass and chrome and muted gray. This room had glass on one side, but the inside was softer. The walls were painted a warm off-white. The floor was pale wood instead of carpet. A long, low bench ran along the window, and in the corner someone had placed a rubber plant that did not quite know what to do with so much light. In the center of the room sat a raised platform about the size of a large dining table. Its surface was smooth and unfinished, the color of raw maple. Cables ran from underneath it to a discreet box against the wall. A panel of lights above the box glowed faintly, a line of tiny dots. Caleb stood beside the platform, one hand resting on the edge. He could feel the potential in the stillness, the way a drummer might feel the beat before the first note. Looks like a spaceship, Rosie said. She walked a slow circle around the platform, fingers trailing in the air just above it. Her reflection followed her in the glass wall. Behind her, the city spread out under a washed blue sky. The rain had cleared overnight. It is a vibration board, Caleb said. It will feel like standing on a speaker without all the noise in your ears. So it is a spaceship for feet, she said. I like it. He smiled. He had accepted Olivia's offer 3 days after she left the envelope in the supply room. He had read the contract twice, then a third time, then put it away and watched Rosie do her homework at their kitchen table while the dishwasher hummed in the background. He had heard his wife's voice in the back of his mind, not a full sentence, just the familiar cadence of her excitement when a design worked. He signed in quiet ink and handed the envelope to Olivia in a hallway that suddenly felt different to him. Now he wore a collared shirt instead of his Navy janitor uniform. His badge had been reprinted. The new one read, C. Mason Acoustic Consultant. The letters were crisp. He fingered the edge of the plastic once, then let it fall. The door opened. Olivia stepped in a half-second ahead of Eli. She had shed her blazer for the moment. The sleeves of her pale blouse were rolled neatly to her elbows. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual. Eli stayed close to her side, one hand touching her wrist. His eyes went first to the floor, then to the window. The light made him squint. Thank you for coming, Caleb said. Thank you for building this, Olivia replied. Her gaze flicked around the room, taking in the platform, the cables, the plant, the wall panel that displayed a simple waveform in blue, pulsing slowly as the system idled. Rosie waved at Eli. Hi, she said. Remember me, lobby girl? Almost crashed into you. He looked at her shoes again. Today they were yellow with faint traces of red paint along the soles. He did not smile, but his shoulders seemed to ease a little. This is Rosie, Caleb said. She is going to hang out sometimes, help with the fun parts. What are the fun parts? Olivia asked. Anything that does not feel like a doctor's appointment, he said. He bent and tapped the surface of the platform with his fingertips. Eli, he said, keeping his tone light. You want to try something with me? The boy watched his fingers. He did not look at Caleb's face, but his attention stayed on the movement. Caleb stepped onto the platform. The wood had a slight give under his weight. Shoes off, he said. Makes it work better. He slipped off his own shoes, then hopped once, testing the stability. The board did not creak. Come up with me, he invited. Eli hesitated. His grip on Olivia's wrist tightened. You can stay right by the edge, Caleb said. You do not have to go far. Rosie kicked her shoes off and climbed up on the opposite side. See, she said, totally not swallowing me. She bounced once. The board moved a little under her, not like a trampoline, more like a held breath. After a few seconds, Eli let go of his mother's wrist. He set one foot on the board, then the other, his toes curling slightly as the cool wood met his skin. Caleb backed up to give him space. Good, Caleb said. Just stand there for a moment. He crossed to the control box and turned a dial. A low frequency buzzed through the structure. The board vibrated gently at first. The wave on the wall panel shifted, its peaks growing a little taller. Eli's eyes widened. He looked down at his feet. The feeling traveled up his ankles into his shins. His body adjusted without thought, muscles responding to something he could not hear but could feel clearly. Rosie started to grin. It tickles, she said. She spread her arms like she was surfing nothing. Caleb watched Eli carefully. This is sound, he said, or one kind of it. Very low. Too low for your ears to hear for most people, but your bones feel it. Eli shifted his weight from one foot to the other. The sensation changed. When he lifted his heel, the connection lessened. When he set it down again, it came back. Caleb turned the frequency up a notch. The glow on the panel brightened. Now it is higher, he said. Different pitch, same volume. Do you feel a difference? Eli's brows pulled together. His shoulders climbed around his ears for a moment, then eased. His hands lifted, hovering away from his sides, as if trying to catch the vibration in the air. He took a small step forward, then back. His toes dug in. It is like listening with your feet, Rosie said. Caleb nodded. Exactly, he said. That is where we start. With the parts of your body that already pay attention without asking. He turned the board off. The vibration stopped. The sudden stillness felt almost loud. Eli waited, watching the floor, as if expecting the sensation to return. When it did not, he glanced up with a faint crease of disappointment between his eyebrows. Caleb noticed. You like that, he said. Eli's mouth moved, not quite forming a shape. His hand drifted toward his throat, stopped halfway, and dropped. We can do more of it, Caleb said. Later. Today I want to show you something else, too. He stepped off the platform and gestured toward a small table where several simple objects lay: a wooden box drum, a metal bowl, a rubber ball. He picked up the drum and hit it lightly with his hand. The sound was soft but clear, a short, rounded thump. Come down, he told Eli. Bring in. Eli obeyed, moving with careful steps. Sit here, Caleb said. He lowered himself to the floor, crossing his legs. Rosie dropped down beside him. Eli copied their posture, the movement a little stiff. Caleb placed the drum between them. Put your hand here, he said, patting the side of the box. Eli laid his palm flat on the wood. Caleb struck the top of the drum again. The air inside vibrated. The surface trembled beneath Eli's hand. The boy's eyes snapped to the place where his skin met the instrument. Caleb did it again, then again, spacing the hits out. Slow, slower, then two close together. He did not ask if Eli heard it. He watched his fingers instead. They twitched, then started to match the rhythm, tapping along the side a half-second after each beat. His taps were softer, but they followed. When Caleb introduced a pattern, long, short, long, long, Eli hesitated, then mirrored it almost perfectly. You see that, Rosie whispered. Olivia had been standing just inside the door this whole time. She did not move closer, but her hand had gone to her own throat at some point, as if to hold something inside. She nodded once. Caleb set the drum aside and picked up the metal bowl. It was smooth and shallow, with a slightly uneven rim. He struck its side with his knuckle. The bowl rang a clear high note that hung in the air for a second. Eli's eyes unfocused. His head tilted a fraction. Touch it, Caleb said. Eli put his fingertips on the side of the bowl. Caleb tapped it again, softer. The metal hummed against the pads of Eli's fingers. You feel that? Caleb asked. This time Eli gave a tiny nod. Rosie grinned. Level up, she said. Caleb smiled as well. Sound is not just noise from outside that you have to survive, he said. It is patterns, shapes, things you can feel and control. He tapped the bowl in a simple beat, then stopped and waited. Eli lifted his own hand and knocked on the rim. The tone was not as clean, but it was there. He watched the way the metal vibrated and then stilled. They stayed like that for a while, passing the rhythm back and forth. The city moved beyond the glass. The sun slid behind a stray cloud, then out again. Later that afternoon, after the session had ended, and Olivia had taken a quieter, looser Eli back to her office for a rest, the sky changed again. By the time Rosie's aunt dropped her off after school, a new front had rolled in from the water. The clouds were low and heavy. Rain began in a soft patter that turned quickly into a steady drumbeat on the windows. Caleb had stayed late reviewing notes from the morning and tinkering with the settings on the vibration board. His head felt full in a way he had not experienced in years. The good kind of full. The kind that came from thinking forward instead of away. He was just shutting down the control panel when the receptionist called his extension. "Caleb," she said, "do you know where Eli Grant might have gone? His mother is in a meeting, and he is not in her office." Caleb's hand tightened on the edge of the desk. "Did anyone see him go out?" he asked. "One of the interns thought she saw him near the stairwell by the courtyard," the receptionist replied. "Security is checking the cameras now." "I am on my way," he said. He hung up, grabbed his badge, and headed for the back stairs. The courtyard sat on a lower level, open to the sky in the middle of the building's horseshoe shape. Glass rose on 3 sides. The fourth was a stone wall with a narrow door that led to a storage area. Today the rain fell straight through the open space. Water puddled on the slate tiles. Small streams ran toward a central drain. Under the slight overhang near the wall, a small figure crouched with his back against the stone. Eli's sweatshirt was damp across the shoulders where the wind had blown rain in. His jeans were dark at the cuffs. His hands were clamped over his ears. His eyes were closed. The sound in the courtyard was not deafening. To most ears it was just weather. To someone who had spent a lifetime in a clenched silence, the layered patter of drops on stone glass metal and water might be too much all at once. Caleb walked out into the rain. It soaked his hair in seconds, slid down the back of his neck, seeped into his shoes. The air was cold and smelled like wet concrete and the faint green of the few plants clinging to their boxes along the edge. He stopped a few feet from Eli and lowered himself to sit on the wet stone. His knees protested. He ignored them. He did not reach out. He lifted his hand and knocked 3 times on the tile beside him. The sound was small against the rain, but it traveled through the stone. Eli flinched, then stilled. Caleb waited a beat, then did it again. 3 knocks, the same spacing. He tapped his knuckles once against his own chest, not hard enough to hurt. The vibration echoed inside his ribs. Feel that he said quietly more to the air than to the boy. He knocked again on the ground. 3 short beats. Tap, tap, tap. After a moment, Eli's fingers loosened around his ears. He slid one hand down, then the other, leaving them hovering at his jaw. His breathing was still fast. His eyes opened a crack. Caleb kept his gaze on the tile. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Then he changed it. 2 quick taps, 1 slower. Eli's head turned a fraction toward the sound. His right hand moved. He let it drop to the ground beside his leg. His palm pressed flat to the wet stone. The cold shocked his skin and made his fingers curl, but he kept them there. Caleb knocked again, closer to Eli's hand this time. The vibration carried through the slab. Eli felt it under his fingertips, a tiny tremor inside the wider roar of the rain. His lips parted. His brows drew together, not from pain but from concentration. He lifted his own hand and answered. 2 taps, 1 slower. The pattern was not perfect. The timing was a little off. It did not matter. Caleb answered in kind. They sat that way, knees damp backs against the same wall, trading knocks while the storm poured down around them, turning sound into something they could hold between their hands. The rain softened after a while, trading its hard clatter for a steadier hiss. The courtyard shone every stone tile dark and slick. Water dripped from the edges of the overhang in uneven strings. Caleb and Eli kept their hands on the ground. Tap, tap, tap. A pause, then an answer. 2 taps, 1 slower. Eli's shoulders had lowered. His jaw was not clenched anymore. Drops slid from his hair onto his collar, then fell from there to the stone at his back. His breathing evened out, matching some rhythm only he could feel between the knocks and the rain. Another sound entered the space, softer than the storm, the faint shuffle of shoes at the door. Olivia stood just inside the threshold. Her umbrella hung useless at her side. She had not opened it. Water from the walkway outside had soaked the toes of her shoes and splashed tiny dots up the hem of her pants. Her blouse sleeves were still rolled, her conference badge lanyard twisted in one hand. She took in the scene in a single look. Her son on the wet ground, hands spread on the tile. Caleb a few feet away doing the same, neither speaking, both tapping. She did not rush forward. For a long breath, she just watched her fingers tightening around the umbrella handle, as if that was the only thing keeping her from stepping in too fast. Caleb glanced over, once saw her, and tipped his chin in something like greeting. Then he returned his attention to Eli and knocked another pattern. This one was longer, short, short, long, short. Eli listened. His lips moved as he counted timing in his head. His fingers answered a little crooked at the end, but close. A faint, strained sound left Olivia's throat, not words. Relief and something sharper passed through in one brief exhale. She set the umbrella against the wall, stepped backward into the building, and watched from the doorway until the storm softened enough that the noise was less than the knocking. When Caleb finally pushed himself up, his jeans dark all the way to mid-thigh, his palms marked with a faint pattern from the rough stone Eli moved to. He swayed once, then found his balance. "Too loud up top?" Caleb asked. Eli blinked rain off his lashes. He did not nod, but the answer was there. "It can be quiet here and still be noisy in the right way," Caleb said. He looked toward the door. Olivia stepped forward then, crossing the short distance across the wet stone. She dropped to a crouch in front of her son and cupped his face in both hands. "You came down here without telling me," she said. "I nearly lost my mind." Her voice shook, but there was no anger in it, only the memory of fear. Eli held her gaze for a second. Then he reached up and laid his hand over one of hers, holding it to his cheek. Her shoulders loosened. Behind them, rain ran down the glass walls, quieter now. In the days that followed, the weather changed often. The routine in the new therapy room did not. 3 mornings a week, Olivia walked Eli down the corridor toward the glass room, with the wood floor and the vibration board. Some days she left him at the door with Caleb and retreated to the observation room, next door, a small space with a bench, a pot of coffee, and a wall of glass that looked into the main area. Other days she went in with him, leaned against the wall, and watched from closer. The room gathered layers of use. Scuff marks appeared on the sides of the platform where small heels had knocked. The rubber plant leaned slightly toward the window. A basket of small objects grew on the low table, balls, bells, textured cloth. They always started with feeling. Feet on the board, hands on the drum, on the bowl, on the panel that lit up in blocks of color when a certain frequency was reached. "Sound is just movement," Caleb told Eli one morning as he drew a simple wave on a whiteboard. "Back and forth, up and down. Sometimes your ears catch it, sometimes your skin does." He kept his sentences short, his tone matter-of-fact. This was not a miracle, it was a process. Rosie made it less formal. She waited until the exercises were done, then turned everything into a game. She tapped rhythms on the wall and made Eli guess which hand she was using. She laid his palm on her throat and counted to 10 out loud, letting him feel each number vibrate against his skin. "See," she said when he pulled his hand back and looked at his fingers as if they might still be carrying something. "Words are like little earthquakes. Here." She put his hand back on her neck and whispered his name, stretching the vowel. Eli's eyes widened. The whisper did not carry far in the air. It echoed clear under his hand. Later, when he was tired and the room had gone quiet, he would sometimes reach for his own throat and press his fingers there, searching for something that was not there yet. The first time he tried to make a sound on purpose, no one asked him to. He sat on the floor between Caleb and Rosie, the wooden drum in front of them. They had been trading patterns back and forth for most of the hour. His shoulders had relaxed more quickly now in each session. His flinches at sudden noises were shorter. His eyes tracked sounds as if they were objects he could see. Caleb finished a simple knock sequence and waited. Eli lifted his hand, but instead of tapping the drum, he hesitated. His fingers drifted upward, hovering over his chest, then his neck. He placed his palm flat against the hollow above his collarbone. His throat moved. No sound came out, just a faint rush of air between his lips. He stopped immediately, alarm flickering across his face, and looked at Caleb as if he had broken some rule. "That is all right," Caleb said softly. "You can try that again." He moved his own hand to his throat, modeling the position. He took a breath and let out a quiet ah. The word was not important. The vibration was. "Feel," he said. Eli swallowed. He pressed his hand a little harder against his skin beneath his jaw, his eyes fixed on the middle distance. He drew air in through his nose and held it. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then he pushed the air out. His vocal cords caught it, not smoothly, not cleanly. The result was a small, rough sound, more scrape than tone. It was enough. Everything else in the room fell away. The hum of the vents, the faint traffic noise outside, even Rosie's quick intake of breath. For that second, all 3 of them focused on the tiny vibration that had come from inside Eli's body and traveled into his own hand. His eyes opened wider, his fingers tightened on his throat. He had felt the difference between silence and that. He tried again, shorter this time, a puff with a rumble wrapped around it. In the observation room, Olivia's coffee cooled on the small table. She had been taking notes on a legal pad, bullet points that had more to do with meetings than with treatment. Her eyes had drifted up to the glass at the same moment Eli's hand went to his throat. Now the pen slid from her fingers. She pressed her own fingertips to the glass as if that could bring her closer. Her reflection looked back at her eyes, bright mouth parted. Down in the room, Rosie clapped a hand over her own mouth to keep from shouting. "You heard that right," she whispered to Caleb. "I heard that." He nodded, his jaw working. It took him a moment to find his voice. "Good," he said. "Very good." He knew better than to demand more right away. He knew what it felt like to push a delicate system too fast. Eli did not wait for a prompt. He closed his eyes, hands still pressed to his throat, and shaped his mouth around an open vowel. No one had taught him how. He had watched people long enough, absorbing the way their lips formed around sounds they threw past him. He exhaled. This time the noise was slightly longer. Still rough, still broken at the edges, but a note, and not just a scrape. It hovered in the air for the length of a heartbeat. He flinched at the presence of his own voice in the room, but his hand stayed where it was. In the observation room, tears blurred Olivia's vision. The glass in front of her doubled, tripled. She pressed her forehead to it, her breath fogging a patch. Her son was making a sound, not a cry of pain, not a reflex noise, something he had chosen. The next sessions built slowly on that moment. Caleb refused to let it become a party trick. A sound produced in panic could carve fear into the same grooves they were trying to clear. They made it part of the pattern. "Hand here," Caleb would say, touching his own throat. "Breathe, let it out with the drum. Knock, little sound, knock." Rosie invented rewards. "If you do 3 sounds, I will tell you 3 secrets," she said one day. He managed 2.5. She told him the secrets anyway. The 3rd week after the courtyard storm, the rain came back. It tapped lightly on the windows of the therapy room, then harder, then eased as if unsure how much noise was acceptable. Olivia chose to be inside the room that afternoon. She sat on one of the low chairs near the wall. Her blazer hung on a hook by the door. Her shoes were off. Stocking feet pressed flat to the wood. Caleb stood near the whiteboard. Rosie leaned against the bench. Eli sat on the rug with his back to the glass knees, pulled up hands resting lightly on his shins. They had been working on linking vibration patterns to simple shapes and pictures. A train for a long sound. A bird for quick ones. Eli's attention had drifted to the window more than once. "Let us stop there for today," Caleb said. "We have been at it a while." He sounded calm. Inside, he could feel the same coiled energy that had been with him for days now. Progress was coming in small pieces. That was how it had to be. Eli stayed where he was. He looked at the floor for a long moment. Then he turned his head and found Olivia. He studied her as if she were something he had only ever seen through glass. Her bare feet on the floor, her hands clasped in her lap, fingers nodding and unknodding. Her face unguarded now without the CEO mask she wore everywhere else. He pushed his palm against his throat. Caleb stopped moving. Rosie went silent so fast that the room seemed to inhale. Olivia did not speak. She did not even dare to nod. Every muscle in her body tensed as if bracing for impact. Eli drew in a breath. His chest lifted. The air felt thick. He could hear the blood in his ears. He could feel the vibration of the building under all of it. He shaped his mouth around a sound he had never made before, only felt in the throats of others, seen on their lips. His hand stayed at his neck, anchoring him. He let the air go. He started. The consonant buzzed under his fingers. It wobbled, cracked, and then the vowel followed, soft and not fully formed, but there. Mom. The word was not perfect. It was husky and thin, and carried the weight of every year he had swallowed it instead of saying it. It landed in the room and stayed there. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth. A sob tore free, quick and raw. She slid off the chair and onto her knees in front of him. "Yes," she said. Her voice shook. "Yes, that is me." She did not ask him to say it again. She did not want to turn it into a test he could pass or fail. Eli reached out his free hand and touched her throat. Her own vocal cords vibrated against his palm as she laughed through tears. "Mom," he repeated a little clearer this time. The second time hurt less. The third came out easier. Rosie sat with her back against the bench legs, pulled up, chin on her knees. Her eyes were wet. She wiped them on her sleeve when no one was looking. Caleb turned away for a moment, as if checking a setting on the control box. His vision blurred. He blinked hard until the panel came back into focus. When he looked again, Olivia had pulled Eli into her arms. His hand was still between them, resting against both their throats. He seemed fascinated by the way the vibrations mingled. The rain against the glass shifted to a softer pattern as if leaning in to listen. News traveled quietly at first. A parent who worked in accounting told a cousin whose son used sign language and avoided playgrounds. A pediatrician who had done rounds at the hospital heard about a tech company building an acoustic therapy room and asked for more information. Someone in marketing whose niece wore hearing aids persuaded Olivia to let them film a short, understated piece for the internal network. The video was simple, no music, just shots of the room Caleb had built. Children standing barefoot on the vibration board, their toes curling at the first buzz, hands on drums on bowls on the smooth surface of the wood, faces changing as they felt patterns inside patterns. The clip leaked. Someone sent it to a friend. The friend sent it to a parenting forum. A small Seattle blog picked it up and wrote a short feature. Then another site called. A local news crew asked for access, and Olivia said yes with a caution that made the communications team nervous. "We show the work," she said. "Not a miracle, no grand promises." The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. Caleb watched it on his couch with Rosie. Their apartment was small enough that the television light flickered on every surface at once. The camera showed his hands more than his face. They focused on Eli in profile as he tapped a pattern on the drum and then turned his head toward a sound coming from outside the frame. "They made you sound smart," Rosie said, cross-legged on the cushion, a bowl of popcorn in her lap. "I use small words," he said. "Mom would like this," she added. He swallowed and nodded. On the screen, Olivia appeared for a few seconds. She stood in the therapy room, sleeves rolled the city behind her through the glass. "We have built a lot of tools here that make life louder," she said. It seemed time to build some that make it clearer. Rosie leaned back against him. "She did not look like a robot," she said. "That is good." The calls started the next day. The main switchboard blinked with inquiries from parents, doctors, advocacy groups. Some were angry about past misdiagnoses. Some were desperate. Some were simply curious. Olivia had anticipated it, at least in theory. She had her assistant filter as best he could, prioritizing local cases and situations where standard paths had failed. The board complained about the influx, but the same news clip that had made them uneasy also made the company look unexpectedly human. The stock barely wavered. The room on the 21st floor began to fill. There was Mia, 5 years old, who stomped on the vibration board and laughed without sound when she felt the floor answer. There was Jonah, 10, whose expensive traditional hearing aids had left him exhausted at the end of each school day, his brain fried by the effort of sorting signal from noise. There was Lena, 3, with curls and a tendency to hide her face until Rosie sat on the floor and started tapping a simple rhythm that made the little girl peek out and tap back. Caleb added notes for each of them to his files. Frequencies tolerated, frequencies avoided, patterns that soothed, patterns that agitated. Eli watched the new children sometimes from his place on the rug. His own sessions continued, threaded between theirs, never skipped. He said very few words at first. The ones he had, he used carefully. Mom came more easily now. The sound had stopped startling him when it left his mouth. One afternoon, Olivia entered the room a few minutes late. Her hair was damp at the edges from a sudden shower outside. She had left a board meeting arguing about marketing strategies for a product she no longer cared about as much as she once had. Eli sat on the floor with Rosie and a new boy who refused to look anyone in the eye. They were arranging blocks in a line, each color corresponding to a different rhythm Caleb tapped on the table. When Olivia appeared, Eli glanced up. "Mom," he said. He did not seem to realize he had done it until after the word had escaped. She stopped in the doorway. The room for a moment felt like the only place in the building where the air was soft. "You are here," he added, the words shaped slowly. She crossed the floor and sat with them, knees popping a little as she folded down. "Yes," she said, "I am here." Rosie gave him a small thumbs up behind Olivia's back. He hid a smile. Olivia changed outside the room too. She still arrived early. She still read reports, checked projections, answered questions. The edges did not disappear from her. They moved. Her assistant noticed first that she left earlier on certain days, blocking out the quality time in her calendar with a neutral label that no one questioned. A few directors raised eyebrows when she declined late meetings that conflicted with therapy hours. "Reschedule," she would say simply. Richard Cole grumbled in hushed conversations with other board members about priorities. But when a well-respected pediatric specialist published an article praising Aurora's new approach, citing the company by name, his protest lost some force. One Friday evening, long after most of the offices had emptied, Olivia stood at her window watching the harbor. Lights dotted the water. Reflections wavered. Her phone buzzed with a message from Caleb. Rosie insisted on asking. She wants to know if you and Eli are free for dinner tomorrow. Her words, not mine. A second later, another message appeared. Also, her choice of words, not fancy. Real food, no tiny leaves on top. Olivia smiled at the screen, a small surprise thing. She typed back, "We are free. Come here. I will find some real food. No tiny leaves." The next evening, the building felt different with so few lights on. The lobby security guard lifted a hand in greeting as Caleb and Rosie walked in, carrying a grocery bag between them. Rosie wore a t-shirt with a cartoon galaxy splashed across the front. Her hair had been tamed almost successfully into a braid. They took the private elevator up to Olivia's apartment level. The door opened before they could knock. Eli stood there in socks jeans slightly too short, at the ankles hair damp from a recent bath. He held the edge of the door with one hand and stared. Rosie lifted the bag. "We brought salad stuff," she said, "but I made Dad promise there will also be pizza." Eli looked past her to Caleb, then over his shoulder at the apartment. Warm light spilled out softer than the office. The air smelled faintly of tomato sauce and something baking. Olivia appeared behind her son, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She had changed into jeans and a worn gray sweater. Her hair was down, a few strands already catching at her forehead. "Come in," she said. The apartment surprised Caleb. He had expected clean lines, expensive art, something that matched the controlled sharpness of her office. Some of that was here. The couch was a sleek low thing in a neutral color. The shelves held a few pieces of modern sculpture, almost all of them in metal or glass. Between those other items broke the pattern. A lopsided clay bowl with a child's fingerprints still visible. A framed drawing of a ship done in thick crayon strokes. A small chipped mug with a painted fox on it. Eli hovered near the coffee table watching as Rosie set the salad ingredients down and studied the open pizza boxes on the counter. "You ordered 3 kinds," she said approvingly. "You take this very seriously." "If I invite people over, they should not leave hungry," Olivia said. "Mom burns water," Eli said. The words came out slowly but clear. Rosie laughed. What Olivia asked, trying and failing to look offended. "He is exaggerating," she told Caleb. "A little." Caleb smiled. "I can handle cutting tomatoes," he said. "No risk of fire." They moved into small, easy tasks. Olivia poured drinks. Rosie declared herself in charge of distributing slices so that no one got the boring parts. Eli carried plates to the table, concentrating hard on the distance between his hands and the wood. The sound in the apartment was different from the office. Less mechanical, more domestic. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint whir of the dishwasher from an earlier load, the occasional whoosh of a car on the street far below. They sat around the table and ate. For a few minutes, no one said much. It was not an awkward quiet. Each of them had spent enough time with forced conversation to recognize the difference. Rosie broke it first. "Eli," she said, mouth half full. "At school, do you go to the regular class or the special one?" "Both," he said. "I go to a small group in the morning, then I go to art with everyone." "Art is loud." "Loud good or loud bad?" she asked. He frowned in thought. "Both," he said finally. Olivia watched him as he spoke, her fork still on her plate. Each word seemed to land in her chest. "Do the other kids talk to you?" Rosie went on. "Yes," he said, "sometimes too much." Rosie snorted. "Same." Caleb leaned back, letting the conversation roll. He and Olivia ended up on the couch after dinner, while the kids sprawled on the floor, with a board game, their combined rules incomprehensible and apparently changeable every few minutes. "Does he always talk that much now?" Caleb asked, nodding toward Eli. "Only with certain people," Olivia said, "or certain topics. I have learned more about the acoustics of the school cafeteria than I ever thought I would." Her voice held pride even when she tried to keep it light. "You have changed," he said before he could filter it. She raised an eyebrow. "That is bold," she said, "from someone who used to hide behind a cart and now has his name on the door." He inclined his head. "Fair," he said. She looked past him at the window. The city stretched out in overlapping grids of light, the harbor a dark shape cut into the brightness. "I thought, if I worked hard enough, I could keep everything under control," she said. "If I made the right decisions, there would be no room for this kind of variable." She gestured faintly toward the children on the floor. "And now?" he asked. "And now I have charts of Eli's progress taped next to financial forecasts," she said. "It is not as tidy as I imagined." He followed her gaze to the wall near the kitchen. There, among framed certificates and a minimalist print, a sheet of plain paper was taped. It held a hand-drawn graph in blue marker. Dates along the bottom, a jagged line climbing unevenly. Next to some points, a small word written in careful childish letters. "Mom." "Untidy seems to suit you," he said. She laughed once under her breath. Rosie called them over to settle a dispute about who had skipped whose turn. Caleb let himself be pulled into rules negotiations that made no sense. Olivia watched, arms folded, a small, soft smile she did not quite hide. By the time they left the hall outside, the apartment was quiet. Eli leaned against Olivia's side, eyes heavy full, in that particular way that comes after too many new sounds and good food. "Thank you," Olivia said at the door. She looked from Caleb to Rosie. "For tonight," she added, "for everything." "You are welcome," Caleb said. Rosie waved at Eli. "See you in the spaceship," she said. He nodded. "Spaceship for feet," he replied. The words came out without effort. They rode the elevator down. The cables hummed in their channels. The city's sounds shifted as they descended from the airy distance of the high floor to the denser echoing noises of the lobby. Outside, a light drizzle had started again. Water beaded on the pavement, catching the streetlights in small, scattered glows. Rosie slipped her hand into her father's. Their joined footsteps made a soft, syncopated rhythm on the wet concrete as they walked toward the bus stop, the sound folding into the nighttime city without being lost. Winter settled over Seattle quietly. The rain did not stop. It simply changed weight. Some days it came as a fine mist that clung to everything. Some nights it arrived in hard sheets that rattled the windows of Aurora Tower and made the light inside seem warmer by comparison. On the 21st floor, the therapy room kept its own weather. Children came and went in puffy coats and knitted hats, their hair standing up with static when they pulled the hats off. Breath fogged briefly on the glass before the room's steady warmth took it away. The vibration board hummed through December mornings. The drums picked up new rhythms as small hands grew more confident. Olivia watched the calendar fill. The official opening of the Aurora Acoustic Center had taken months of negotiation. Legal documents, architectural plans, a separate entrance, so families did not have to step through the main lobby and its watchful eyes. The therapy room would be the heart. Surrounding it, consultation spaces, small labs offices. She sat in a boardroom one afternoon with a stack of folders in front of her and a wall of windows behind. Richard Cole leafed through the packet she had given him. His silver hair caught the fluorescent light. The fine lines around his eyes deepened as he frowned. "This is a sizable commitment," he said. "It is," she replied. "Staff equipment, long-term research. You are talking about diverting resources from divisions that have proven returns." "There are returns here," she said. "They simply do not fit into a neat quarterly chart yet." He tapped the cover of the proposal with one knuckle. "We are a technology company, not a clinic. We build devices that shape how people live," she said. "This is not a departure." He scoffed softly. "This all began because of your son," he said. "I am not saying it is not noble. I am saying it looks personal." She did not flinch. "It is personal," she said. "And it is also necessary. We have already helped children whose lives were limited by bad diagnosis and worse equipment. You have seen those reports." He pursed his lips. "A few case studies do not define a market." She slid another folder across the table. This one held printed copies of the recent article from the Pediatric Journal, the local news coverage, the inquiries from hospitals wanting to partner. "You asked about the market," she said. "It seems to be finding us." He glanced at the paper's, eyes moving a little faster now. "Public goodwill has its place," he said. "It does," she replied. "So does responsibility." Their eyes met. Something in his softened, if only slightly. "You have already signed off on most of this, have you not?" he said. "The contracts for the space are in progress," she said. "The board's formal approval is still pending." "Let me guess," he said. "You will reopen the question publicly at the next shareholders' meeting if we shut it down here." "That would be one option," she said. He leaned back in his chair. "You have changed," he said. "So I have heard," she answered. He stared at her for another long moment, then sighed and reached for a pen. "Very well," he said. "We keep a close eye on the numbers, and I want regular reports, real ones." "You will have them," she said. He signed where she indicated. Outside the glass, the sky was the pale color it took on just before the evening lights came up. The city felt poised between one state and the next. The night before the official opening, the main therapy room sat empty for once. Chairs had been arranged along one side, simple and white. A banner in navy and gray hung near the window, the Aurora logo smaller than the words beneath it. Aurora Acoustic Center. 3 bouquets of winter flowers stood in tall vases on a low table. The petals were deep purple and white, with silver branches curling between them. Someone from events had insisted. Caleb stood near the vibration board, hands in his pockets. His collared shirt was open at the neck. The soil in the plant pot by the window had been recently turned. Someone had watered it for the occasion. The elevator chimed. Olivia stepped out first in a dark dress that fell just below her knees. She wore no jacket. The fabric moved when she did. Her hair was pinned back loosely. A small silver necklace rested just above her collarbone. Eli followed in a white shirt and navy sweater. He tugged once at the collar, then let it be. He walked with a slight spring, nerves and anticipation tangled together. Rosie burst in last, nearly tripping over the threshold, tugging at the sleeve of a cardigan she had clearly argued about at some point. "I made it," she announced. "You live 10 blocks away," Caleb said. "You were always going to make it." "Still counts," she replied. There were no reporters yet, no partners, no board members. Olivia had asked for this hour before the doors opened. No cameras, no stage whispers. Just them. Rosie bounced on her toes, then grabbed Eli's sleeve. "Show him," she whispered. Eli glanced at her, then at Caleb, then at Olivia. His fingers fidgeted with the hem of his sweater. Olivia started to speak. "If you are not ready," she began. He cut across her with a small shake of his head. "Ready," he said quietly. He moved into the center of the room, where the afternoon light pooled on the wood. His sneakers squeaked faintly. He stopped in front of Caleb. Caleb straightened without meaning to. His heart beat louder than the distant hum of the building. Eli pressed his hand against his own throat. He had done it so many times now that the gesture seemed natural, a kind of punctuation. He looked at Caleb. "Thank you," he said. The words were clear. His voice still had that slightly higher musical quality of someone new to using it, but the consonants landed. Caleb swallowed. "You are welcome," he answered. "That is not it," Rosie whispered, unable to help herself. Eli shot her a look. She nodded vigorously as if cheering him on from inside some private game. He took another breath. His fingers pressed a little harder into his skin as if anchoring himself. "Dad," he said. One syllable. The room tilted very slightly. Caleb felt every pulse in his body at once. His hearing sharpened and blurred. His feet were on the floor and also nowhere. He had heard that word thousands of times in his life from Rosie. On good days, on tired ones shouted from across a park, muttered half asleep in the dark. It was familiar and dear and wrapped in years. From Eli it landed differently. Eli stumbled onward. "You help me talk," he said slowly, his brows drawn in concentration. "You help my head be quiet. You are nice to Mom. Rosie says we are a family. I did not have a dad before, not like that." He stopped. His throat worked under his own palm. "If it is okay," he finished, voice almost a whisper, "I want you to be my dad too." The quiet that followed had a weight. Rosie sniffed once beside the banner, eyes shining. Olivia stood with one hand braced against the back of a chair, her knuckles white. Caleb stepped forward. His shoes made almost no sound on the wood. His hand lifted, then dropped, then lifted again. It finally landed gently on Eli's shoulder. "I would like that very much," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Eli's face changed. The guarded lines that had lingered near his eyes for years loosened. Relief and something like pride slipped through. Caleb knelt to bring them level. "Listen," he said. "You and Rosie were both already under my skin. This just gives me a name for it." Eli stared at him for half a second, then stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Caleb's neck. The hug was firm, all small bones and surprising strength. Caleb's own arms closed around him, one hand at the back of his head, fingers in his hair. Olivia wiped her face with the heel of her hand, then gave up on keeping herself composed and let the tears fall. Rosie crossed the distance at a run and crashed into both of them, arms flung wide. She nearly knocked Caleb over. He laughed into Eli's shoulder, a broken, joyful sound. "I told you," Rosie said into the tangle of their jackets. "I told you we are a pack now." Later that month, the courtyard wore winter in a different way. Small white lights had been strung between the stone columns, zigzagging above the open space. They reflected in the wet tiles after a brief shower that had passed an hour before. A portable heater hummed softly near one wall. Chairs had been set in 2 short rows with a clear space between, facing a simple arch draped with evergreen and more lights. Friends and a handful of family occupied the seats. Some of them worked at Aurora, some did not. They spoke quietly, voices misting in front of their faces in the cold air. Olivia stood near the arch in a white dress that skimmed her ankles. It was not elaborate. The hem was still in danger of catching mud if she stepped wrong. She had chosen it herself. Caleb stood opposite her in a dark suit he had borrowed, and then been persuaded to buy when Rosie and Olivia insisted it looked better on him than on the hanger. Rosie and Eli stood between them, each holding one of their hands. The officiant, a woman from the city clerk's office with a calm, even presence, smiled at the 4 of them. "We are here to witness the joining of this family," she said. in the way the law recognizes and in the way they already recognize in their lives. Someone sniffled in the second row. It might have been Olivia's assistant. His tie was slightly crooked. Anyone object? The officiant asked out of formal habit. Rosie raised her free hand. A few people laughed under their breath. Yes, the officiant said, not sure whether to be concerned. I object to waiting any longer, Rosie said. That is all. The laughter came louder this time. Eli signed something quickly with his free hand, fingers moving in sharp little shapes. Rosie glanced at him and grinned. He says I have been a bossy sister for ages, so it is fine, she translated. Caleb squeezed her hand. The ceremony stayed short. Vows were simple. No poetry, no extended speeches, just plain words spoken carefully into the clear, cold air. Olivia promised more listening. Caleb promised more staying. It was enough. When it was done, when their hands had been joined and released, when the small cluster of people had clapped and someone had whistled, Eli tugged on Caleb's sleeve. Dad, he said. The words still caught in Caleb's throat every time. Yes, he answered. Eli looked up at him, then back at Olivia and Rosie at the lights overhead and the damp stone under their feet. Can we go inside now? He asked. My toes are cold. Caleb laughed a real full laugh that warmed his chest. Yes, he said. We can go inside. They walked back toward the building together, fingers laced in a chain that did not break the sound of their footsteps echoing softly off the stone, as the courtyard emptied of voices and the city lights began to reflect once more in the glass. A year later, the rain still came. It slid down the glass of Aurora Tower in familiar paths, tracing lines the city knew by heart. Ferries crossed the harbor, their horns low and distant. The building hummed with all the same systems, but the pattern of its days had changed. On the ground floor, a new sign hung above a separate entrance tucked just off the main plaza. The letters were simple and clean. Aurora Acoustic Center. Parents came through that door, with children in their arms or holding tight to their hands. Some walked stiffly braced for disappointment. Some walked quickly pulled forward by children who had seen videos and wanted to stand on the magic board with bare feet. Inside, the reception area felt different from the main lobby upstairs. Softer seats, a shelf of picture books, a tub of small fidget toys that clicked and spun and bent in quiet ways. On one wall, framed photos held pieces of other lives. A girl grinning on the vibration board, hair flying. A boy with his palms pressed to a drum, eyes closed. A teenager with a hearing aid visible at the curve of his ear fingertips, resting on his throat as he spoke into a microphone for the first time. In one frame, a boy with light brown hair stood with his hand on the glass, looking at the city behind his own reflection. Eli. He was 10 now. His jeans reached his ankles properly. His hair was still too long at the back, because every time Olivia suggested a haircut, he negotiated for one more week. He arrived that morning with his backpack slung over one shoulder and a green notebook tucked under his arm. The notebook had his name written on the cover in careful block letters with a small drawing of a waveform beside it. Afternoon, Eli, the receptionist said. Hi, he replied. He sounded different than he had a year ago. The hesitations between syllables had shortened. His words landed in a rhythm that was his own. Sometimes the consonants wobbled. Sometimes he let them. He had more tools now to be understood than just perfect pronunciation. Mom upstairs, the receptionist asked. Meeting, he said. She will come later. He headed down the hall without being told which room he was in. He knew the path by sound. The floor in this corridor hummed a little more under his sneakers, the vibration from the board in the central room traveling through the structure. Voices drifted through open doors, some loud, some soft. A baby cried once sharply, then was soothed. A teenager laughed, a surprise bark of sound. In the main therapy room, Rosie sat on the bench by the window, one leg swinging freely. She had grown taller, the lines of her face sharper, her hair longer, and usually tied up in ways that did not last the day. She waved when Eli walked in. You are late, she said, by approximately 2 minutes. The bus was slow, he answered. Excuses, she replied, but her smile gave her away. Caleb stood by the vibration board adjusting a cable. He looked up at the familiar footsteps. He had a few more lines at the corners of his eyes. The work had done that. So had the laughter that came with it. Hey, he said. Good day at school. Eli shrugged. Science was loud, he said, in a good way. We did experiments with tuning forks. I knew more than the teacher. You did not correct the teacher, did you? Caleb asked, a warning note buried inside the question. I waited until she asked for questions, Eli said. Rosie said that is the rule. Smart rule, Caleb said. He wrote something quickly on the clipboard beside him. Where is Mom? Eli asked. Still on the call with the partnership people, Caleb said. She will be down. She made me promise not to start the fun part without her. I heard that Olivia's voice said from the doorway. She stepped into the room, setting her phone on the ledge by the glass. She wore a simple black dress and boots with low heels. Her hair was twisted up, a few strands already falling loose. You start fun parts all the time without me, she added. Today I wanted to see this one. This one is just another step, Caleb said. I know, she answered. That is why I want to be here. Rosie hopped off the bench. Today is the presentation, she declared. Eli's show. We have been working on it for 2 weeks, minimum. Eli flushed a little at the attention, but he did not pull back. He walked to the center of the room, where the floorboards met in a subtle pattern. He placed the green notebook on a low table, then picked it up again. Do you want to stand on the board? Caleb asked. No, Eli said. Here is good. He opened the notebook to a page filled with lines and little drawings. Waves, arrows, notes in his careful handwriting. He looked at Olivia. You sit, he said. She obeyed, lowering herself to the chair nearest him. He took a breath. Old habits surfaced. His hand lifted toward his throat, then dropped halfway. He did not need the anchor every time now, but he liked knowing it was there. Some people think sound is only what you hear, he began. His voice carried clearly across the room. The consonants sat firmly in the air. The vowels stretched just enough. For a long time, he continued, I did not hear much, not in the way other people did. I felt things instead. The building, the rain, people's footsteps in the hall. It was very loud, but not useful. He flipped to the page. A small sketch showed a stick figure with lines around its head. When the device was in my ear, everything was noise, he said. So, my brain decided to shut the door. That is how it survived. He did not look at Olivia when he said it. He spared her that. She watched him anyway, hands clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles paled. Caleb and Rosie stood side by side near the window listening. Then Dad heard the wrong sound, Eli went on. He took it out. The noise stopped. The world was still loud, but in a different way. I could feel some of it. Some of it hurt. Some of it did not. He reached for the metal bowl on the table and struck it lightly. The note rang out clean and high. He touched his fingers to the rim and closed his eyes briefly as it vibrated. Now I am learning which sounds I want, he said. I pick them. I keep them. Sometimes I still do not like the cafeteria. That is okay. He opened his eyes and looked straight at Olivia. I like this room, he said. I like our apartment. I like when Rosie sings very badly in the car. Hey, Rosie protested, but her grin did not falter. Eli smiled faintly. I wanted to say thank you, he said, to Dad, for hearing me before I could talk. He turned his head toward Caleb. And to you, he said to Olivia, for listening after. The room stayed still. The usual hums receded, or maybe they simply fell into the background of something more important. Olivia stood, her chair legs gripped lightly on the wood. Come here, she said. He did. She hugged him, notebook pressed awkwardly between them, until Caleb reached in and took it, so the embrace could be full. Rosie sniffled. I did not cry, she announced. Of course not, Caleb said. He reached over and squeezed her shoulder. The rest of the day unfolded in small scenes. A little girl who had refused to step onto the vibration board the first time now jumped onto it without prompting. A teenager rolled his eyes but followed every instruction precisely. A mother sat in the waiting room with her hands around a paper cup of coffee, shoulders slowly dropping from her ears, as she listened to her child laugh in the next room. Evening came early. The sky outside the therapy room darkened. Streetlights blinked on one by one. The harbor glimmered. Snow began as a suggestion mixed with rain, hardly noticeable at first. Then the flakes thickened, catching in the beams of light around the courtyard, swirling in slow, wandering paths. Olivia closed out her last email of the day and shut her laptop. The office upstairs felt too quiet. She took the elevator down instead of calling for her car. In the therapy room, the lights had been dimmed. Only the ones near the window remained bright. Someone had left the plant by the glass. Its leaves cast soft shadows. Caleb leaned in the doorway, watching through the glass, as Rosie and Eli taught each other a new clapping game. It involved slapping their knees, crossing their arms, and tapping their fingers together in a complicated pattern that made them both laugh when they missed. They spoke and signed over each other, hands moving in the shared language they had built. Some words were clear, some were their own shorthand. Olivia stepped up beside Caleb. He did not startle. He had heard her footsteps in the hall. Busy day, she said quietly. He said quietly. It was, he answered. They watched the children for a moment in silence. Outside, snowflakes stuck to the glass and then melted, leaving tiny trails of water. The sound of the city felt muffled, wrapped in cotton. Inside the room held a small universe of noise. palms meeting, breathless laughter, the occasional squeak of a shoe on wood. "I like this sound," Eli said suddenly. He had not seen them come in. He was talking to Rosie, but his voice carried. "This one," he added, clapping their pattern again. "It feels like home." Rosie nodded. "Told you," she said. "We are a pack." Caleb smiled. Olivia exhaled. "Ready to go?" she asked. "Why'd be?" "In a minute," he said. They stayed where they were, a little longer, shoulder to shoulder, watching their children mark out another rhythm on the floor. The patterns rose and fell, simple and sure, threading through the soft hiss of distant traffic and the faint whisper of melting snow. The building kept humming. The rain waited for its turn again. The glass held their reflections, 4 figures in a room of light hands reaching out, voices found and heard. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.